Okay, so let's just jump right in. If you're doing any kind of academic work, you know you're basically swimming in a sea of arguments, right? Every single paper, every article, it's all trying to convince you of something. And that presents a pretty big challenge.
I mean, how do you actually know if an argument is any good? How can you tell the difference between solid reasoning and something that just, sounds convincing? This is maybe the most important question for any critical thinker, and that's what we're going to tackle today. We're going to build a kind of logic map to figure it all out.
Okay, so the very first thing we need to get straight is that not all arguments are playing the same game. They're not all trying to do the same thing. So before we even get to is it true or false, we have to take a step back and ask a much more basic question. What is this argument even trying to do? What's its goal?
And this is where we see the two main paths fork. On one side, you've got deductive arguments. Think of these as aiming for a slam dunk, absolute certainty. They're making a huge claim. If our starting points, what we call premises, are true, then our conclusion is guaranteed, 100%, no wiggle room. But then you've got the other path, inductive arguments. They're a little more humble. Their goal is just probability. They're saying, hey, if our premises are true, our conclusion is probably, likely to be true.
Here's a really easy way to remember this. People often call deductive reasoning top-down logic. You start with a big general rule and you apply it down to a specific case. Inductive is the total opposite. It's bottom-up. You start with a bunch of specific little observations and you build up to a bigger general conclusion. See the difference?
All right, so let's go down that first path on our map. Let's talk about the deductive path. When we come across an argument that's shooting for that guaranteed conclusion, there's a really clean two-step process we can use to see if it actually pulls it off.
Step 1 is all about checking the internal logic, just the pure structure of the argument. We ask one simple question: is it valid? And only after we've answered that can we even think about moving to step 2, which is checking its connection to reality. That's when we ask, is it sound?
Now, this is super important, so listen up. When we're talking about validity, we don't actually care if the starting points are true or not. Not yet. It's like a thought experiment. We just pretend for a second that the premises are true, and then we ask ourselves, if they were true, would the conclusion absolutely have to be true? If the structure forces that to happen, then bingo, the reasoning is valid.
Okay, this is a great example of where that logic can just fall apart. So, Mary's pet is black and white. Fine. And we know penguins are black and white. Got it. Does that force the conclusion that Mary has a pet penguin? No way. It could be a Dalmatian, a zebra, a painted turtle. The conclusion just doesn't follow. The logical chain is broken, so this is an invalid argument.
All right, your turn. Let's do a quick checkpoint. If it snows, the mail would be late. The mail is late, therefore it is snowing. Is that a valid argument? Think about it for a second. Nope, it's invalid. Why? Because even if the first two statements are true, the conclusion isn't guaranteed. The mail could be late for a million other reasons, right? A flat tire, sick mail carrier, anything. The logic isn't airtight.
Okay, so let's say an argument passes that first test. We've checked it, and its reasoning is flawless, it's valid. Now we can move on to step 2, and this is where we finally ask, are the premises actually true in the real world? And if an argument is both logically valid and it has all true premises, we call that a sound argument. That, my friends, is the gold standard for deductive reasoning.
Oh, I love this example, because it makes the distinction so clear. Look at the logic here. All sharp eyes eat bananas. All banana eaters can fly, so sharp eyes can fly. The reasoning is actually perfect. If those first two things were true, the conclusion would be inescapable. So the argument is totally valid. But what's the problem? Well, the premises are just bonkers. They're completely false. So we have an argument that is valid, but it is unsound.
And now for the classic, the one you see in all the textbooks. All men are mortal? Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Let's run the check. Step 1. Is it valid? Yep. If the first two are true, the third has to be. Step 2. Are the premises true? Yes. All men are mortal is true, and Socrates was a man is true. Since it passes both checks, we have ourselves a sound argument.
All right, let's hop over to the other side of our logic map and talk about the inductive path. Now, remember, the goal here isn't certainty. It's just probability. But don't worry. We still have a very similar two-step process to figure out if they're any good.
So for inductive arguments, the first thing we check is the level of support. Do the premises make the conclusion likely?
We ask, is the argument strong? And then, just like before, if it passes that test, we move on to check the facts and ask, is the argument cogent?
Okay, and here's the key difference. Validity was black and white. It either worked or it didn't. Strength, that's more like a volume knob. It's a spectrum. An argument can be really weak, kinda strong, or super strong. We're just asking, assuming the premises are true, how probable do they make the conclusion? The more evidence you pile on, the stronger the argument gets.
Just look at the difference here. On one side, every day in history, the sun has risen. Therefore, the sun will rise tomorrow. I mean, that's about as strong an inductive argument as you can get, right? The evidence is overwhelming. But then look at the other one. I saw a kestrel last weekend, so we'll probably see one this weekend. It's pretty weak. A single data point isn't much to go on. Both are inductive, but the strength is worlds apart.
And just like sound was the best-case scenario for deductive arguments, cogent is the gold standard for inductive ones. To be cogent, an argument has to hit 2 marks. First, it's got to be strong. The evidence has to actually support the conclusion. And second, those premises have to be true. This classic swan example is perfect for explaining this. Imagine you've spent your whole life in Europe and you say, all the swans I've ever seen are white, so all swans must be white. Now, based on your evidence, that's a pretty strong argument. The problem isn't the reasoning, it's the premise. Your premise, while true for you, is based on incomplete data. You haven't been to Australia. Because we know black swans exist, the argument isn't cogent, even though it feels strong from a limited perspective.
Okay, we've walked down the deductive path and the inductive path. We've seen the 2 checks for each one. So now, let's zoom out and put this all together into one single, super useful visual map. And there you have it, the whole process in one picture. Anytime you come across an argument, you start at the top. First question, what's the goal here? Certainty or probability? That tells you whether to go left for deductive or right for inductive. Next, you check the logic itself. Is it valid? Is it strong? If it fails right there, you can just stop. It's a bad argument. But if it passes that first test, you move to the final step. Check the facts. Are the premises true? And that will tell you if you've got a sound or a cogent argument on your hands. And look, this isn't just some abstract philosophy lesson. This map is a real, practical toolkit you can start using like today in your academic work. So how does this actually play out? Well, when you're reading a research paper, you can use the map to figure out if their big claim is deductive or inductive, and then you can run it through the checklist. When you're writing your own essays, this map is your new best friend. It's like a quality control check to make sure your own logic is solid before you turn it in. It helps you find the weak spot in someone else's literature review or decide if a study's evidence really justifies its big conclusion. It's about leveling up from just having an opinion to building a truly rock-solid argument. And really, this all comes down to one crucial point. It is so easy to just accept arguments that we already agree with and dismiss the ones we don't. That's just human nature. But real critical thinking means putting every argument, especially our own, through this kind of logical filter. A truly good argument isn't just one you happen to like, it's one that can actually withstand this kind of analysis, no matter what its conclusion is. So, I'll leave you with a thought. Think about your own field of study for a minute. What are the big foundational arguments, the classic debates that everyone talks about? Now that you have this map, this tool, which one are you going to reevaluate first?